And my name's Colette Kavanagh. I'm the early to first level coaching and modelling officer for literacy. So today we are looking at developing children's vocabulary in the early years, and just to let you know, today's session will be recorded. Okay, so we're going to be looking at why vocabulary is important, and really looking at the main focus of ways we can develop children's vocabulary. We'll look and reflect upon what's going on within your own establishment, and we will look at some practical ideas of how we can build children's vocabulary whilst having fun with words. We want to think about why vocabulary is important and what you're already doing. And yeah, at the end of it, hopefully you'll be going away thinking about, well, and the knowledge with more practical ideas of ways you can develop it. So, why do you think vocabulary is important? You can talk as a group, and maybe one person could type it into the chat for us. So why do you think vocabulary is important? And I'll give you time to do that just now, give you a couple of minutes to have a wee discussion and type it into the chat. Yeah, vocabulary is important because without it, you can't fully communicate your needs. Yes?
Definitely, so that children can communicate day to day with the people around them, absolutely. Anything else you can think of why vocabulary is important?
I bet you're all having a huge discussion over it. It's just so difficult whenever we can't see you or hear you. So vocabulary is important for everyday communication, as you said. You can communicate with your culture and society as a form of expression, absolutely. So you can express yourself, express your needs, your emotions, tell stories, and make friends. But it's also very important academically. So literacy floats on a sea of talk. Learning to read well starts early, and good early language skills are the vital stepping stone. Good language skills are crucial for developing literacy skills. Children need to be able to understand and use a range of words so that they can go on to read and write these words. Well-developed language skills are essential for developing your reading and writing, your literacy skills, and in particular, your vocabulary is integral to your academic success. There's also that link there with dialogic teaching, being able to listen attentively and being able to have two-way, three-way discussions, which really features more whenever children are in school. So we know that good language is crucial for developing literacy skills, and a child who has not benefited from a rich preschool language experience is likely to start school with a more limited vocabulary. We know that this vocabulary gap exists, and it's highlighted in the Ready to Read document. So there are many children starting school with underdeveloped language, which means that they're going to struggle to access the curriculum. Also, on top of that, we've got the COVID impact. We know that there has been concerns about the overall pace of attainment, that it slowed down over lockdown, and we're almost playing catch up at the moment. But most disadvantaged children will be the most affected. So an even larger poverty-related attainment gap may exist. However, the Scottish Government has reassured communities that reducing the poverty-related attainment gap is still a priority. An important part of research that we look at is that children's vocabulary ability at age 5 is strongly associated with their reading ability at age 7. So children who display poor vocabulary at age 5 also showed below average reading abilities at age 7. Spoken vocabulary is so important in its own right, but it also has a major impact on other areas of learning. So when you think about children who talk confidently and take an interest in learning, they're more likely to understand such vocabulary when they're reading. So their expanding vocabulary will also help them in their writing and to be more imaginative. Children with limited vocabulary, on the other hand, struggle to understand their comprehension skills and stories. So children with poorer vocabulary are likely to experience less word learning opportunities and have less developed word learning skills. So in comparison, they learn and develop their vocabulary at a slower rate. So the vocabulary gap then continues to widen. So there's many different programs that you can use. One that we've highlighted throughout the authority is WordAware. And from WordAware, it does state a child who does not understand concepts such as big, empty, when his peers do, will miss out on crucial learning about the world around him. A child who has more developed vocabulary and is able to speak in a more precise way about his experiences will develop more abstract thinking than a peer who is limited to pointing or simply labelling items. So there's a weakness in early vocabulary there that will impact on later mathematical and scientific understanding, because they need to be able to identify the language to really thrive scientifically or through their maths and really understand it. As a teacher, I've experienced that with children, especially when it comes to maths problems. The children need to be able to read the word problem to fully understand it. So, language is important for a child's early success in school, but also for their later life outcomes. So, on this slide, I think it's the next slide, Paula, if we can move on. There's lots of reasons why it's important, okay, why vocabulary is important. I'll give you a few minutes just to have a wee read over that, or 1 wee minute.
I was just going to say there on the previous slide, there was a few statistics just around about kind of later life impact. So the idea that, if you look at children's vocabulary at the age of 5, that's strongly associated with their kind of mental health when they're 34, as well as their kind of employment. Oh, the PowerPoint's going absolutely crazy. So vocab is particularly important for, kind of, as Colette said, early success in school, but it's also really important in terms of later life outcomes.
Paula, is that on a timer?
I don't know why it's doing that. It's just moving itself. 2 seconds.
Sometimes there's a wee button that you unclick and it'll tell you it's moving itself, basically. If you go to slideshow.
Go to slideshow.
And see that use timings, take that off. Yeah, that's you.
I'll skip that forward again. Sorry, that was the slide there I was talking about. So if you look at a child's kind of vocabulary at age 5, strongly associated with their literacy at 34, as well as their mental health and kind of employment. And then some statistics there around about the kind of the impact of COVID and the worries that, children's skills have deteriorated, and there's kind of big concern from kind of teachers and early years practitioners that, there's been an impact of the lockdowns on children's development, and in particular their kind of communication and language development, as well as their social and emotional development. So that's a biggie. I'll move this on now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Just to highlight what you were saying there, Paula, so there is absolutely an increasing concern and evidence around the impact that the pandemic has had on children's speech, language and communication. So now more than ever, there is a need for us as practitioners to be aware of the importance of building children's skills in the early years and throughout their schooling. So teachers are concerned that children will have been reading for pleasure less at home during lockdowns too. So children with poor vocabulary skills are twice as likely to be as unemployed when they reach adulthood, and up to 50% of children from disadvantaged areas start school with poor speech, language and communication. And like Paula said, vocabulary difficulties are at age 5 are significantly associated with poor literacy, mental health and employment outcomes at age 34. So 60% of young offenders have low language skills, which is quite frightening. So we're in a privileged position that we can actually help children here and now to prevent some of those issues that might take place. So on this slide, what is a word? Okay, so it's not a trick question. Please do put your ideas into the chat section. And we'll have a wee look. Yeah, I'll send the PowerPoint out as well, so don't worry about it if you just kind of listen and take part in the discussion. And it's also being recorded, so you'll be able to watch the session back again. So what is a word? So formation of letters that makes a sound that aids communication. Yeah, absolutely. So a spoken word, a written word, a single distinct meaningful element of speech or writing. It can be a unit of language consisting of one or more spoken sounds or the written representation. We learn and we store words and develop knowledge about words to make sense of them. We gather relevant information related to the sounds, the meanings, their grammar. For example, banana, we know that's something we eat. It's a piece of fruit that's yellow. We know that we can peel it. We know that monkeys like to eat them. Okay, we know it's a 3-syllable word. We know it starts with a B sound. And we know that banana means one versus bananas, which means more than one. So both meaning and sound knowledge are essential for word learning, and this will help with remembering. We want children not to just remember, but to truly understand the words and have a real depth of knowledge. And it also goes, if they're really embedding all of the things on this slide, it really does help whenever they're going to be reading and they're sounding out words, they're then more able to decode words and associate the meanings with the words. So we'll go into the next slide. Okay, so when we were setting up this meeting, we had asked if you would be able to bring along a sweetie or a drink. So I hope you've all got something with you for this little activity. If not, you can pretend. So we're going to really just be thinking more about words. So take a sweet or your drink, and from the moment you unwrap it, unwrap the sweet or take the drink, open the drink, I want you to describe what you are experiencing. Please do put your words into the chat, and let's see what descriptive words we get. So I might have a can of Coke in front of me whenever I'm drinking it. It's very refreshing. Okay, Paula's is a twist, fantastic, happiness, tasty. Anything else? If it's a nice sweetie, it might be delicious, cozy, euphoric. I don't want to ask what you're having. Yes, euphoric. Okay, so now what I want you to do is to think about how did we learn these words and why did we use the words that we used? Okay, so our exposure to words are linked to a context. It might have been through an adult-child interaction, because we learn our words through our everyday experiences. We hear them in sentences. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the language environment, the world around us is so very important to language learning. So the language that children are exposed to at home, at school, and in nursery, these are all key places where we as adults, when we're having those interactions with children, we can make a difference. And hopefully through today's succession, it's sparking some of those ideas for you too. So we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so what do we do with words? Well, first of all, we hear them and we understand them. We speak them, we read them, and we write them. So remember, if a child can't understand or speak a word, then they will struggle to read and write them. Language is an important foundation. And again, it's coming back to that slide that literacy floats on a sea of talk, the one that had the boats on it. It's coming back to that idea. Also, whenever we're talking, we're really talking to learn, and that's another approach that we can use. So on the next slide, I want you to have a wee think about in your establishment, think about what you're already doing to develop vocabulary, and if you can pop your ideas into the chat section, Paula and I, you can share them with us. So some ideas might be show them whenever you're using objects. You know, you might show it. So if you're talking about a creature, you might show a wee crab. When you're describing words, you'll say, oh, it means this, or you might use it in different settings. You might point it out when you're reading it in a storybook. You might use it through play. It might be in a nursery rhyme. So anything like that you're doing that develops vocabulary, if you can just share it with us in the chat, that would be great. Yeah,
so we've got...
On you go, Paula.
I was just going to say there's in singing and storybooks as well. Yep, definitely.
Narrating
play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of talking about what the children are doing, so that sort of narration as the adult, definitely.
Mathematical language, yeah. Even when you're going to be sharing out, you know, today when Paula and I were out in a nursery, they were having snack time, and you know, it might be how many people can sit down here at the table, and you might count, things like that, yes. Role modelling, repeating back, researching on the computer, yes, absolutely. So a wee quote for you. Children made huge gains in their spoken vocabulary throughout their school years. Most of this happens spontaneously, with learning promoted through their interaction with other people, through reading and through other medias. It's such a natural and apparently automatic process that you may not focus on it or include it as part of your aims, but helping children to extend their vocabulary is important and should be promoted for all ages, and that's Teaching Talk, Lock and Beach 2005. So again, just relating back to, these are things that you're doing already without even realising it, that help to really develop children's vocabulary.
Yeah, and somebody else was just saying there, Colette, as well, you know, kind of giving children time to explore and explain and having their part in the conversation as well, which is really important. So definitely lots of great ideas. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, so on this slide, there are many principles for building vocabulary. So building a strong foundation is recognising that poor vocabulary impacts on learning. So we want to target vocabulary early. Make word a priority. So build a word-enriched environment. Promote language in general, and have fun with words. Make it fun so that children want to take part. Maintain a sustained effort. So consider a whole school approach. So in this case, a whole nursery approach, and teach vocabulary across the ages. Share your learning with others in your establishment so that everyone can benefit. Use a range of methods. Give children multisensory experiences to help them develop their vocabulary. Go with the flow, go with the child.
Try to select and develop vocabulary at the right stage for the children in your class. Words that are just tricky enough, okay, just right. Try to ensure in-depth teaching. Use multiple exposures. Children need to hear or read a word many times. They need lots of opportunities to link new knowledge to what they already know. So research would suggest that a child needs 12 instructional encounters to fully know the word. Teach words in context. Teach words in practical, hands-on context, and use them in a variety of sentences. And teach strategies. Help children to develop their own learning. Okay.
I was just going to say clearly before we moved on, there's some other kind of principles on the kind of right-hand side there. They, across approaches, they really tie in. But one of the things that came up was really helping children to pull on kind of similarities between words and kind of making connections and kind of categorization. So that idea of kind of building word meanings through kind of networks, so bringing together what words mean and how they're similar or different and making kind of connections tends to be a big one, just to kind of highlight as well. Another other one just to mention is this idea that children need a kind of a mixture of instruction or support, I suppose. So children really kind of benefit from kind of focused or explicit instruction and attention to vocabulary within the early years, you know, as staff trying to make that a kind of a focus. And, you know, that this idea that if you're focusing on giving children kind of child-friendly definitions or other aspects of the words, then they're more likely to remember the words. So kind of highlighting keywords or certain words, you know, before a storybook or during it, and encouraging children to really tune into that and exploring it together is maybe more beneficial than just children simply hearing it through the storybook without that attention. So just another few things to mention before we move on.
Okay, so when we're building vocabulary, there's a lot of things that we use to really make words count and have fun with the words. So we're really wanting the high quality interactions and following the child's lead, like they said. Use statements and comments rather than too many questions so that children hear words in the sentences. Talk about what the child is doing or looking at. Describe your own actions as you sit next to the child. So that, you know, this use of actions and gestures, your facial expression really does help. And as somebody had commented, repetition is great to really get children to be hearing the word over and over again and really internalising it with what it means. So you'll be doing that through introducing new words from books and using different concepts, which is really important in the early years, and really pushing that, having fun with words, enjoying the words, celebrating the words, and reinforcing vocabulary. Yesterday, Paul and I were out for a visit, and the children for the Queen's Jubilee were going to be focusing on the tiger who came for tea, which was a really kind of fun and relevant way of exploring some of the words in the book and linking it to a relevant context, which is a really good idea. So we'll move on. And there are some more ideas for you. It's important to really be having fun with the words. You're going to be planning and highlighting keywords before a task. So whenever you're planning to deliver a word of the week, you know, you would be sitting together as a team and really identifying what you would like the word to be and what ways you'll be able to really incorporate it into your learning that week. I think whenever you're rewarding children for using the word, you might be saying things like, whoa, oh, that was a great word, and using different concepts like fancy Nancy and ooh la la that Paula knows more about. So I'll pass over to Paula just now.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that Colette had mentioned this sort of idea of kind of planning and highlighting keywords. So that can even be if there's maybe new resources within the nursery you've got in or particular activities that you're completing. Sometimes it's really even within the moment, quite useful to sit and think, oh, there's particular words that are maybe a wee bit different or new to the children that it's worth maybe exploring and explaining, before you get into the task. And then that gives you that wee kind of brief moment where you're focused on the vocab, given a child-friendly definition, and then you get the chance to talk about it more and use it as you're doing a particular activity or exploring a particular toy or kind of task together. Other nurseries have really like this idea of rewarding children's use of vocab or new or different words, and there's not particular words you need to do it with, but this idea of when you're kind of engaging in a to and fro conversation or really noticing what the children are talking about, that you might stop and say, oh, that's a wow word, or oh, that's a fancy Nancy word, or whatever way you want to stop and kind of appreciate really and reward use of kind of nice or different words. And again, that can be any words that kind of come up. The example that springs to mind is being out at a nursery, and I think we were actually playing outside, and a wee girl said, oh, that's random, look at that down there, and I can't even remember, I think it was an empty bottle or something else that had rolled under the fence into the playground, and I said, oh, that random, that's a fancy word, and taking a wee minute just to kind of explore that together. You might want to also think about, using the storybooks. That's a big part of the early year setting. So, really stopping to jointly appreciate authors' use of vocab, highlighting interesting or different or new words within storybooks, taking that wee minute to say, oh, that's an interesting word, enormous or gigantic or, whatever the word is you want to stop at. And again, just spending that brief wee moment within an activity that you're already doing, to really think and explore a word together. You might act the word out, you might talk about what it means, you might briefly clap the syllables, etc. So anything like that, a wee kind of quick moment within that storybook is really powerful in terms of building vocab and word learning skills. Also just helping children to ask about words that they don't know. That can be something that's quite tricky for wee ones who aren't as great with their talking skills. Maybe they're a wee bit more delayed, they're a wee bit slower with their talking, and they tend to find that kids with poor vocab or a slower, they're slow to talk, tend to not maybe ask what words mean. So trying to really model that within your nursery is important. So even between kind of adults, stopping and saying, oh, I'm not quite sure what such and such means, I'm going to find that out, or I'm going to ask X, Y, or Z, and modelling that it's okay to ask and to explore that. Because you tend to find that kids with a really good language are the types of kids who are asking why, and they're also asking what does enormous mean or what does random mean, so they get those word learning opportunities. You can also think about if you're consider having a sort of a working or a lively word area or word table within your kind of nursery, and that's something we can touch on in the next session as well. And I think there's a few examples on the next slide, so you can have a wee look at them. I mean, I think especially within the early years, the most important thing is that if you are looking to focus on any particular words, obviously the written words there for the adults, so that we know what the focus word is and things like that. But for the children, it's really important to have that kind of visual support, so have some sort of picture or photograph and even object. So down at the left, I think the bottom left there, that example in particular has some nice kind of like animals and stuffed toys and things like that. And I think they were working on the word creature. So it's really, really important that the children have that visual support. And again, that if these things are out for the children to explore and the written words there for the adult, it means that if children are to go over at a later stage and explore that themselves or with other children, then hopefully if an adult is there, then they can repeat and kind of emphasise the keywords that you're maybe trying to work on. So that's just some examples there as well. I think what we're going to move on to now is just a wee another wee quick activity. I'm hoping that you guys either have a wee storybook, like a storybook to hand, or something that you could quickly even catch just to have a wee flick through. We're going to just build on that idea of appreciating an author's use of language, and what I would really love you to do is flick through a storybook that you would use within your nursery together, or even take a few and kind of scribble down or pop into the chat, please, any sort of words that you might naturally stop at and kind of explore with the children. Again, there's not any right or wrong answer, so please just kind of put your ideas into the chat, and we'll see if we can try and guess what storybooks you've got.
We love trying to do that.
It's always far too tricky, but just to give you some examples while you're looking at your own storybook. So I had pulled out a few from our cupboard in the speech therapy department, and I was looking at The Large Family, A Quiet Night In, I think I'd looked at, and I've got a wee post-it note here, and I'd scribbled down some words, so things like early and quiet, fetched, tucked, kindly, dark, strange, crept. So you tend to find that there's really rich vocab in children's books, so there's lots to pull from. Oh, there's some examples coming in now. So we've got sobbing, huddled, scared, lost.
Sobbing. Trying to think what book that would be. Ball.
Tiptoed. I know we often think, is it all from the same book? Is it from different ones? So yeah, there's tons of really great words to pull from storybooks, and even knobbly. Yeah. There's just so many nice words to choose from. Stomping, gigantic. Fantastic. So again, it's just to stop and say that, as Colette mentioned earlier, there'll be lots within your own nursery that you'll be doing, as part of your day-to-day routines that are building children's vocabulary, whether that's through the back and forth conversations, repeating keywords, lots of these great things that you're doing, and storybooks is a big part of that. So even within the storybook reading that you're doing with the children, or the book corner you've got to explore, even that idea of stopping and appreciating new or different words and exploring that with children, acting it out together, or clapping the syllables, or talking about what it means, even just within that moment, is a fantastic way to build vocab. So hopefully that just gives you a wee idea of the vocab you can pull from your own books. We're going to have a wee think now about having fun with words, because actually we can kind of introduce or teach children all the words they're ever going to need. Their vocab very much is going to be developing as they grow and move into primary, and also, as adults we continue to learn. So we really want to try and make word learning fun, and really build children's language through a variety of different means. And playing word games is a great way to do that, as well as just through their everyday play. So we want to really try and develop their word learning skills as well as their vocab. So we're wanting to really try and pull on sound as well as meaning knowledge. So that might be that we're focusing on the sounds within the word one day or within one game, or it might be that we're focusing on kind of word meaning. So we're going to give hopefully some examples. And to get us started, what we're going to do just now is play a bit of a word game. And again, you'll maybe be slowed down a bit here having to type in your answers, but we'll see how we get on. So this game is called Category Call-Out Game, and we've played actually with quite a few different nurseries now. So for this kind of quick game, what you need to do is think of a particular category. So some inspiration might be kind of living things, or things with wheels, or things with circles, things that we eat, drinks, etc. You can choose whatever category you want, depending on the children that you're working with and the level that they're at. And then what you want to do is set a timer for any set time, so 1 minute, 2 minutes, or longer, or shorter, whatever's going to suit. So what we're going to do just now is I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute, and what I want you to try and do is think of as many things with wheels as possible. But the trick is that you need to keep a note of the answers, so we don't want any repetition. So we want as many different answers as possible. So things with wheels, and I'll start the timer now, and we've got 1 minute to see how many different answers we can get. Chairs, yep. Plane. Skateboard, motorbike.
Oh, Lego.
Yeah, that's a new one.
No.
We're always looking out for new answers. So you'll see as the time goes on, you'll need to think more outside the box. Wheelbarrow, bus, super, about 30 seconds left. So anything else you can think of? Roller skates, trolley, about 20 seconds.
Wheelie bin.
Wheelie bin, classic, yep.
Oh, is that
That's a new one. 12 seconds, 10, anything else, 8.
Door in a subway.
3 seconds, 2. Oh.
Oh, a tire swing. I like that one.
I think I'll give you that. It was just out of time, but I think I'll include it. So that was about 15 different answers I think we got there. So as I said, this is a no resource kind of word game that you can play, and a lot of nurseries have found that these sorts of kind of no resource games are really good for times of kind of transitions or kind of lulls where maybe you're transitioning to lunch, etc., or at the end of group time. And it's a great way, fun way as well, to try and support children with their word learning and their vocab. And you can really differentiate it. So you can start off with a longer time frame or with an easier category, and then you can build up from there. So things like things that we eat or drink or wear or toys, etc., tend to be a wee bit easier. And then as you can see, you could probably build it up and make it harder the more you play with it, you play the game. So that's just a wee example of a word game. When you're having fun with words and when you're looking at playing word games within your nursery, again, as I said, you want to be thinking about, it might be you're focusing on within phonological kind of awareness. So it might be sounds within the words, it might be syllable games, it might be rhyming words. But you might also find that you're playing games that are building on word meanings, or it might be descriptive skills, or even category games, so looking at words or things that fit into different categories and kind of sorting words, or it might be action words, you know, kind of acting out things, or verbs that you're focusing on, or it might just be kind of general games, so kind of lotto board games and snap and pairs and all these types of kind of games that sometimes children enjoy to sit down and play as well. So there's a variety of ways that you can have fun with words. In the next few slides, what I'm going to try and do is highlight a few different games that work fairly well within the early years. It's not an exhaustive list, and apologies that we're not in person kind of playing it together, but I'll try and pull out a few examples, and there's some pictures on the slides too. There's a game that you can play that's called Like Mike. So for that, you might just want a wee pretend Mike when you can see in the picture, or again, you can use your imagination and do it with no resources. Again, this is a category-based game, so you want to choose a category, and then within your little small circle, kind of work your way around the different children, trying to think of something that belongs to that category that you really, really like. So it might be food or television shows or animals or cartoons or characters. And again, you'd be modelling that sentence, you know, I really, really like rabbits, and then you would maybe move round because your category is animals, and the next wee one needs to think of an animal that they really like. And again, if children are coming up with answers that aren't related to the category, you want to model that again for them and try and bring them back and see if they can think of something belonging to that particular category. Another game that you could try is Sort It Out. So you can see the wee baskets there. This is a game that you can use objects for. You could use pictures or photographs for. That would make it a wee bit easier, but you could also use it with no resources. You could do it outside with two big hoops, and you know, just do it all with the children listening. So the idea is that, again, you want to choose two different categories. So in this example here, I think it's animals versus food, but you could have, you know, toys versus clothes, or, you know, whatever the two categories is you want to focus on. And again, you want to work through the different items together and then sort them out. So is it something we wear, or is it something we drink? You know, is it something we eat, or is it something that we wear, etc. So you would choose two categories and just work through that together. Another game that you might want to try is Find Your Partner, and there's some pictures down there on the left hand side. You can do an easier or a harder version. For the easier version, all you're going to need is a selection of sort of everyday objects or toys or pictures of those things or photographs, and you're going to need kind of two of each. And what you want to do is muddle these all up, you know, hand them out at random to a wee group of children, ready, steady, go, and try and encourage the children to find their partner. So find the person who's got the same object or the same photograph as them. And what you really want to do is, when they've managed to find their partner, we really want the adults to be there to scaffold the language and to really help them to name what it is on their card or that they're holding. You know, what is it? You know, talk about where would you find it, talk about, you know, what we do with it. At that moment where they've found their partner. So if it was the ice cream, you might talk about, oh, it's a delicious cold ice cream that you've got. I wonder where I might find an ice cream, you know, the ice cream van or the shops, etc. Oh, I might eat it on a hot day. You know, what do we do with it? Do we wear it or do we eat it? I think we eat it. So again, children might need more or less help with that. So you can be there to kind of support. A harder version of that is the same game, but you're using slightly different objects or pictures. You want to use semantically related pictures. So there's some examples there, you know, a hand and a glove, or, you know, an umbrella and a rain cloud, or an umbrella and welly boots, you know, a pencil and a paper, fork and knife. So you'll see that these words kind of go together. They're not the exact same, but they're related. And that's a wee bit trickier. So again, the children need to search for their partner. And then again, when they find their partner, we're wanting the adult to be there to again scaffold and model the language. So really to talk about, well, why does an umbrella and a rain go together? Well, I know when it's raining outside, I need my welly boots and my raincoat, and then normally I take my umbrella too. So you just want to model again your kind of your thinking and your thought process, so that children are getting the chance to hear all of that lovely language being modelled. Some other examples again on this slide here. I Spy is a firm favourite. There's so many variations of it. So you could do I Spy as the classic with kind of sound. So I spy something starting with or I spy something starting with s. You could also try it with adjectives, so descriptive words, you know, I spy something green, or I spy something round, or I spy something tall. And again, you're helping children to build their vocab. Some other variations on I Spy games that we love are the Thinking Hat game. So that's a variation on I Spy, except you're using word meaning clues rather than sounds. And the object doesn't necessarily need to be in sight. So this sort of idea of I'm putting on my thinking hat and I'm thinking of something that's an animal. And then the children have to start guessing. And what you need to do is keep giving semantic clues until the children get the right answer. So for example, I might say, I'm putting on my thinking hat and I'm thinking of an animal. And they might guess, you know, dog, cat. And I say, oh, no, it's not a dog or a cat. And I'll give you another clue. I'm putting on my thinking hat and I'm thinking of an animal and it likes to eat carrots. And then again, they might start guessing. And you want to keep giving clues until they can get the right answer. So you might end up saying, I'm putting on my thinking hat and I'm thinking of an animal and it really likes to eat carrots and it hops. You know, and then they might eventually guess rabbit, etc. So again, you're given word clues and they're having to really use their listening skills and make guesses based on what you're saying. You could also try the Big Brain game, which is similar to, again, I Spy or Thinking Hat, but slightly more challenging for wee ones. So what you want to do for that is use your big brain and you want to give a word meaning clue as well as the initial sound. So I'll give you an example. And again, the word doesn't need to be, or the thing doesn't need to be in sight. So you might say something like, I think with my big brain, something that's part of a tree and starts with B. And again, you're wanting them to hopefully guess branch, or it might be, you know, I think with my big brain, something that you drink and it starts with and you're hoping they might guess milk or milkshake, you know, whatever it is. So again, that's a wee bit trickier because they might start to guess and shout out things, you know, that are things that you eat, but they've not listened into the initial sound. So it's a wee bit trickier, but the kids can engage really well with that. And another great way to build vocab. You might also want to try a word walk or a sort of scavenger hunt. So for that, you just want to kind of choose a word or a particular concept, you know, tall or big or thick or thin or smooth, you know, small, tiny. And then you want to look for objects or different things that match that particular descriptive word and kind of collect that all together. So there's some examples there on the kind of left-hand side, you know, kind of circular and kind of colourful, I think the other one was. And again, that's a great way to build vocab skills. Another example that you might want to try is this sort of what's inside game, creating a bit of interest with a sort of treasure box or a fancy bag, you know, any old box really or bag will do, to be honest. It's how you present it and get the kids enthused, and you can fill it with everyday items. You know, younger children will really enjoy pulling the things out and telling you what they are, but if you've got children that are a wee bit older, a wee bit more able, then you might want to try and see if they can guess from your clues what's inside the bag. Again, you know, it's round and it's hard and you would kick it, you know, they might guess it's a ball, etc. So again, another great kind of limited resource game that you can play with the children. Some final examples here on this slide, just some examples on how you might want to try and build children's attention to sounds within words. Any way that you can clap out syllables or jump out syllables or kind of squash them with Play-Doh is a great one. I've also had people using kind of Lego blocks, you know, and bits of pictures attached to it to represent the different amounts of syllables, and then building them together into a tower, which works quite nicely. And as I said before, you might want to try that classic I Spy with initial sounds, or even with the rhyming words, I think works quite well. So, you know, I spy something rhyming with tear, you know, and it might be a chair that you're looking for them to find. So these are great kind of no resource games that you can try as well. Another one that you can try is this idea of Forgetful Teacher. So at various points in the day, you might want to kind of be a bit silly and forget the names of common items. So, and only really remember that initial sound. So you might be doing arts and crafts together, and you say, oh, I've forgotten what it is we need again, but I know that it starts with a oh, that's right, it's sellotape or it's scissors. So again, you're just being a bit daft, a bit silly with the children, and you're getting them to listen into that initial sound. Another game that you might want to try is kind of this what's in my bucket or brilliant bucket. Again, this you could use a kind of a real life bucket for, or a picture, or even just pretend works absolutely fine. And as the adult, you want to model the sentence using alliteration. So my bucket is full of slimy slugs. You know, my bucket is full of red rabbits, etc. My bucket is full of big buttons. And then what you want to try and do is encourage children to contribute their own ideas and add to your brilliant bucket. You know, encourage them to use kind of fuller sentences if they can, and really celebrating all the lovely alliteration, alliterative adjectives that you get. And really, the sillier the better, to be honest. And it's a great way to have fun, be a bit silly together, and build on getting them to really listen into initial sounds. Because anything that we can do to build their vocab and to build their phonological awareness and listening at an early stage is really, really going to support them when they move into primary school. So it is a lot of fun, but it's also really, really important in building really important skills. I'm hoping that gives you some ideas. Clayton and I can pass on some resources as well. And just some kind of final thoughts, I suppose, and then we'll have some time for questions. But, you know, have a wee think within your own setting. Think about the children that you work with. You know, how is their vocabulary developing? You know, what strategies or approaches do you already use to help children learn and use new words? And from today and hopefully next session as well, is there anything new or different that you could try to build children's vocabulary or extend what you're already doing in a way? And in your own setting, do you include vocabulary teaching as part of your planning? So kind of thinking that through as a practitioner or as a staff group. So a bit of a stop and think moment. Again, you can have a wee chat amongst yourselves just now. And what I'll do is I'll allow a few moments as well. If there's any kind of feedback you want to give us in terms of some of these questions in the chat, fantastic. And if there's any kind of questions you're wanting to ask as well, then Colette and I are happy to try and answer those for you.
Absolutely.
I'll keep a wee eye on the chat. If there's any questions that come through, we'll answer them as we go. Just to say that you know, have a wee think about, is there anything from today as a staff group that you want to try out before the next session? You know, even trying a few of the word games is normally quite a good place to go. And also we've got our second session arranged as well. So what we'll be looking to do in the second session is really kind of build on things that you're doing kind of day to day and having a wee look at choosing vocabulary that you might want to focus on and the STAR approach. So building on really what we've touched upon today.